Hello. I have already prepared my presentation about lesson planning. So I only include three topics in the discussion. We have the about the nature or meaning of the lesson plan, elements of the lesson plan, and then the simple steps on how to make an effective lesson plan. So the different kinds of lesson plans will be discussed in the next video. So I hope this video will help those who are pursuing principles of teaching subject this semester, and I hope they could get an idea and concept on how to write a lesson plan. And if you have questions or concerns about the presentation, so message me directly, reach me through at my Facebook. Thank you so much and God bless. So enjoy this discussion. Okay, I know most of you already have an idea about what is a lesson plan. But this time, we will go deep on the meaning of the lesson plan, the parts of the lesson plan, and then the guide on how to make an effective lesson plan. So before I'm going to proceed to the discussion, I have here three objectives in this presentation. So the objectives are, okay, here are the objectives. So this presentation will going to explain the nature and meaning of lesson plan, enumerate the parts of a lesson plan and give examples, provide the steps and guides in making an effective lesson plan. So now we will define what is a lesson plan. So a lesson plan is defined as a teacher's daily guide for what the students need to learn, how it will taught, and how learning will be measured. So simply, a lesson plan is the teacher's guide in conducting his/her lesson. So without lesson plan, the teacher cannot teach the topic alone without lesson plan, because the success of the classroom, the success of the discussion depends highly on the lesson plan of the teacher. So that's why it is very important. So since it is a guide, can you imagine what the classroom would look like if there is no lesson plan, if the teacher has no lesson plan in his/her instruction? So you can imagine that the classroom would be disorganized, right? Okay, now let us move on to the parts of the lesson plan. So the lesson plan usually have 5 parts. We have the objectives, the subject matter, then the procedure, then the evaluation, and so can you imagine what the classroom would look like if the teacher has no lesson plan? So you might think that the classroom is very disorganized, and then you cannot be sure if the students really learn from the discussion. So that's why the lesson plan is very important in the learning process. Okay, now let's move on to the different parts of the lesson plan. So usually, the lesson plan has 5 parts. Okay, we have the objectives, the subject matter, the procedure, the evaluation, and then the assignment. So let us first tackle the objectives. So the objectives of the lesson plan, it is the specific aim of the lesson. It easily tells what the students need to know after the instruction. So simply, it is a statement of purpose of what the students need to learn after the discussion. Say for example, if the topic is about parts of the plants, so the objectives would be at the end of the discussion or at the end of the lesson, the students are expected to identify the different parts of the plants. So that is an example of the objectives of the lesson plan. So we will go deep on the objectives of the lesson plan in my next video. Then let's move on to the subject matter. So the subject matter of the lesson plan, it is the title of the topic or the lesson. So this is the part where the materials of the lesson plan, the references, and then the value of your lesson will be included. So it is under the subject matter part. So again, subject matter is the title of the lesson, of your lesson. Okay, now let's move on to the different parts of the lesson plan. Usually, a lesson plan has 5 parts. Okay, we have the objectives, the subject matter, the procedure, the evaluation, and then the assignment. So let us first tackle what is an objectives. So objectives, it is the specific aim of the lesson. It easily tells what the students need to know after the instruction. So simply, it is the statement of purpose of what the students need to learn after the discussion. Say for example, if the topic is about the parts of the plant, so the objectives would be, at the end of the lesson, the students are expected to identify the different parts of the plant. So that is an example of objectives. It is the statement of purpose of what the students need to learn after the discussion. So next, by the way, I'm going to go deep about the different levels of the different domains of objectives in my next video. So now let's move on to the subject matter. So the subject matter is the title of the topic or lesson. So simply, it is the title of the lesson. But in the subject matter part, the reference of the lesson, then the materials to be used, and then the values to be learned in the discussion will be included in the subject matter. Okay, the next part is the procedure. So the procedure is the phase of putting the plan into action. So this is where the implementation of the lesson happens. The whole activity of the teacher and the students usually occur. And then in the procedure, the activities such as motivation, review, drill, then application, and then generalization happens, and as well as the group activity. So this is where the implementation of the whole course of plan happen. That is in the procedure part. Okay, in the evaluation part, this measure how much learning the students gain from the instruction. So the teacher could assess the students of how much learning they learned from the instruction by way of performance-based assessment or the traditional paper and pencil test assessment. So in the performance-based assessment, the teacher can measure the students' learning by way of giving them an activity that the children were going to perform. Like for example, if the topic is about a story, then the teacher could give them an assessment like let them dramatize the story. So that is the performance-based assessment in the evaluation. And then the other one, which is the paper and pencil test, that is the teacher is simply give a test. Now, the last part of the lesson plan is the assignment. So assignment is the final part of the lesson. It is the extension activity where students are given a task to complete at home, which could also give hint on the next discussion of the subject. So this is where the students are given an extension activity so that they could this is in line with the theory of recency and frequency and recency. So frequency, so there is a, in order for the students to master the skills they acquired from the discussion from the topic, it should be they should be given more practices or exercises so that they will master the material. So that's why assignment is very important in the lesson plan. Again, the different parts of the lesson plan are the objectives, the subject matter, the procedure, the evaluation, and then the assignment. So these 5 parts should be used in making a lesson plan. Okay, now let's move on to the simple steps or guide on how to make an effective lesson plan. The primary step is identifying the learning objectives. So this phase is formulating the specific aim of the lesson, that is what the students need to achieve at the end of the discussion, or what they need to learn, just like what I discussed earlier about objectives. So formulating objectives has a set of criteria also to make it effective. Since formulating objectives has a set of criteria and has a different levels of domain, I will make another presentation for this part so that you may get some idea on how to formulate an effective objectives. Now the second step is plan the specific learning objectives. Yes, after identifying the objectives, the next step to do is to plan the specific objectives. That is, what kind of experience you want your learners to perform and what particular activity is applicable to your lesson. So the whole experience of the learners in the whole process of learning should be in line with the learning objectives. So the next step is plan to assess student understanding. Of course, if you have already a sound objectives and a well-prepared activities in the lesson, the next thing to plan is to identify what type of assessment tool that would be most applicable to measure the amount of students learning, or did they master the material that they've experienced. So the assessment tool to use, like what I mentioned earlier on the parts of the lesson plan, is by the use of performance-based assessment, like by way of role-playing or dramatizing. It could also be simulation or anything that requires students to perform assessment activity. The second tool to use is the traditional or measuring the students' learning by way of paper and pencil tests. Like for example, conducting a short quiz. Usually teachers prefer the latter assessment tool because it is easier to administer and not time consuming. Now you have already have a sound objectives of the lesson, the plan of what kind of experience the students to perform, and then the assessment tool to use to measure the mastery of the subject matter or the lesson in the discussion. The next step is to plan to sequence the lesson in an engaging and meaningful manner. Of course, you have to see to it that the whole implementation of the lesson will be organized so that the students will learn in a meaningful way. Sequencing the lesson, that is planning a systematic way of conducting the lesson, which also depends on the kind of teaching method you are going to employ in the lesson plan. Like for example, in developmental method, that is starting the lesson from review, followed by motivation, then the lesson proper, then the group activity, application, and then generalization to evaluation, and then the last part to assignment. So that is the organized way of implementing the lesson using the developmental method. The method to use vary from topic to topic because some topics is most applicable to this type of method but not to others. Now, choosing the suitable method for a specific lesson is also important consideration in lesson planning. Now we are done with planning and sequencing the lesson. Okay, now we are done with planning and sequencing the lesson. So the next step is create a realistic timeline. So this is very important in lesson planning. There must be a specific time period to attain the whole discussion of the topic. For example, allot time for a specific lesson, like it should be attained for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, or others can use up to 1 hour. In-service teachers already have time allotment for a specific subject. For example, the time allotment for mathematics subject is 50 minutes, then for Araling Pilipunan is 40 minutes. Now, in creating a lesson plan for a specific subject, you have to see to it that you utilize well the time allotment for the topic, and as much as possible, avoid overtime since the students need a little break from the previous subject before entering the next subject. So this is in line with Thorndike's law of readiness in his laws of learning theory. Okay, now you have already learned about creating a realistic timeline. The next step is to plan for a lesson closure. So in planning for a lesson closure, the teachers must be done with the evaluation phase. After the evaluation, the teacher will then give the final activity for the class that is giving the students assignments, and sometimes there are also teachers who will conduct a short energizer activity, like having the class dance or sing a song. So in this way, the class will close with a happy and alive mind. So those are the steps or guide on how to make an effective lesson plan. I hope you have now idea on how to create your own lesson plan. Now, since I'm done with the discussion about the meaning of the lesson plan, the parts of the lesson plan, and then the simple guide on how to make an effective lesson plan, I prepared a question to see if you really learned from my presentation. So here is the question. Okay, what part of the lesson plan is the most important? So comment your answer on the comment box below, and those who will have the best answer will going to win 50 pesos regular load for any network. Since this question do not have a one correct answer, the best answer will be the winner. So if you have questions in the discussion, you can leave a comment in this video. And then you can also suggest a topic for my future presentation. Feel free to drop them in the comment box. Now you have learned about what is a lesson plan, the elements of the lesson plan, and the simple steps or guide on how to make a lesson plan. So I hope you have now idea on how to create an effective lesson plan. And thank you so much for your time, and stay tuned for more updates and videos about lesson planning and other education topics. Thank you, bye-bye, and God bless.